Formula One pre-season testing confirmed something that team development curves have been hinting at for a while. The 2022 cars are looking seriously quick. Back at the initial presentation of this new technical rule set in late 2019, the FIA simulations from detailed research into the new concept suggested the cars would be around 3.5 seconds slower than the designs of the time. Now those new cars are here and running on track, and they have confirmed suspicions that it'd be faster than anyone initially expected. Regular viewers of our channel might remember a video we made a little while ago explaining why the new cars were not going to be as slow as was first suggested. The claim in 2019 that the new rules would make the cars 3.5 seconds slower was never a stated target but a predicted consequence of cutting downforce and restricting areas of development. As we got closer to testing, we had an expectation that these new cars wouldn't be much slower at all, and now we have our first reference points. The key thing to keep in mind as we work out how fast the 2022 cars really are is that the fastest lap time from Barcelona is basically just the starting point. Lewis Hamilton's fastest lap in the first pre-season test was 1 minute 19.138 seconds. That's 2.4 seconds slower than we saw in qualifying at last year's Spanish Grand Prix, which is the only fixed reference we have because the Barcelona track was tweaked slightly last year. And it's a brilliant comparison anyway because we know so many variables are fixed. Hamilton's 2021 pole time, a 1 minute 16.741, would have been set with low fuel, the strongest engine mode, and the driver trying to get the absolute most out of the tyres. The Grand Prix weekend would have taken place in more favourable conditions in May, the cars were a known quantity, well understood and developed, and everything would have been prioritised for performance. So it's reasonable to expect that 2.4 second gap will be all but eradicated by the time F1 returns to Barcelona this May for the 2022 race. Tyre supplier Pirelli had a slightly different way of judging the speed of the 2022 cars. Pirelli's motorsport boss Mario Isola pointed out that the fastest lap in last year's Spanish Grand Prix was 1 minute 18.149 seconds, set by Max Verstappen. He said the tyre compounds were comparable and was impressed that the new cars were only 1.5 seconds off that benchmark. Consider that Verstappen's lap came after a late pit stop and was 1.3 seconds faster than any other driver managed in the Grand Prix, and the new breed of cars look even more competitive. AlphaTauri driver Pierre Gasly gave a handy summary at the end of the first test when he said, "The 2021 cars were amazing to drive and I think our starting point in terms of performance is not so far from last year." So considering all the development that we're going to see at the start of the season and over the next couple of months, I think we will see pretty much similar performance. Perhaps the most telling snippet came from Isola and Pirelli. Last year, most of the teams assisted Pirelli in developing tyres for the switch to 18-inch wheels by running mule cars and supplying estimated downforce levels for Pirelli's off-track work. Those team estimates were meant to project the expected car performance at the end of the 2022 season. And Pirelli says that the real cars are already close to the simulations the teams provided. If the new cars are really starting the 2022 season with the level of performance they were initially expected to end it with, then it will be fascinating to see how they develop. But before we explain what to expect as these cars evolve, we've got a quick request. If you're enjoying this video, please give it a like, leave a comment if you have something to say, and subscribe if you haven't already and you want to see more of what we have to offer. Your support makes a huge difference, and we'd love for you to follow the 2022 season with us. There are two reasons we can be confident that the 2022 cars will rapidly match, if not surpass, the 2021 cars once they are pushed to maximum performance. The first is the evidence from past seasons. For example, in 2019, the benchmark from the first week of pre-season testing was 1 minute 17.393. In qualifying a few months later, the pole time was 1 minute 15.406. That year, the cars were 2 seconds faster when it mattered. If that happens again, the 2022 cars will match the 2021 cars. And we can trust teams to make that kind of step because of how aggressive everyone expects the development rate to be. Aston Martin's Chief Technical Officer Andrew Green made a prediction during the car launches that while the overall downforce levels are inferior for now, that wouldn't be the case for long as the cars will evolve dramatically in the coming months. Green said it's a reasonable aerodynamic loss compared to the highly developed cars that we had in 2021. Most teams have only been working on them for less than a year. The generation of cars that we've just finished racing had multiple years of development with their particular concept. It's to be expected that we're going to take a step backwards, but I think the development slope that we're on means it won't be long before they supersede the downforce levels that we saw in 2021. Teams always find the biggest gains at the start of a new set of regulations, and this year should be no exception given the changes have put the teams on a steep learning curve with ground effect aero and stiffer setups. This means the 2022 cars generate lap time differently. They produce less drag but are ultra quick at high speed because of the emphasis on ground effect aero, which makes them faster in the fast stuff. But they are also 43 kilos heavier overall, they have heavier low profile tyres, they're running stiffer suspension with no hydraulic trickery, and they're generating less aerodynamic load at low speed, and that is making them slower through the slow stuff. A quick look at how Hamilton's pre-season test lap compares to his 2021 pole lap gives a reasonable glimpse at where the lap time around the track is lost. So it seems likely that the outright pace of the 2022 cars compared to last year will vary from track to track depending on the circuit configuration. But there's also potential for improvement at low speed as teams understand their setups more. And because more time is spent in those corners, that is where significant relative gains can be found. Mercedes driver George Russell said the 2022 cars have probably outperformed the initial projections F1 set for the new regulations. Russell's reference of a target to make these cars several seconds slower makes it sound like that was a specified objective. But as we hinted near the start of this video, F1 and the FIA insist it was more of an estimated consequence of the changes they were making. That's an important point of differentiation. The real purpose of the rules was to make the cars follow more easily and improve the quality of racing. It would be a concern if the pace of the cars was tied to that, but the simplification of the aerodynamic surfaces, the switch to a greater emphasis on ground effect, and tighter prescriptions in the regulations was all in the interest of creating cars that leave behind a kinder wake and are less sensitive to wake anyway. A performance drop-off was expected, but only as a natural consequence of this, and the FIA was happy for the cars to be slower in their own simulations because it was expected that the teams would then make bigger gains with their own development. There are presently no alarm bells ringing that the cars being quicker than most expected means the teams have simultaneously subverted the intentions of the new rules. It appears that the cars are still easier to follow than before, and as the lap time appears to be coming from high-speed corners and faster straight line speeds, it's possible that braking zones will be slightly extended compared to before, which may create more overtaking possibilities as well. Regardless, there are positive noises about the combination of the cars still being very quick and the turbulence being less problematic. McLaren driver Lando Norris said, "I look forward to the high-speed circuits which we will be going to because that's the corners where we tend to not be able to follow so much over the last few years. But if you have such good cars in the high speeds, which it's looking like at the minute, and are able to follow much closer on those types of tracks, it should prove to be good racing and exciting for everyone to watch." Most of us are probably hoping that Lando's right, because then it seems like F1 will have the best of both worlds. But as long as the ability of these cars to follow more closely isn't affected, then how fast the new cars turn out to be really isn't going to matter.